Hey magical friends, welcome back for another magical movie review. My name is Molly. If you haven't been here before, I am on a personal quest to review all of my favorite movies, starting with the Disney Princess series. We're reviewing the Disney Princess movies in order of release date. So last week we reviewed Beauty and the Beast, which is my personal favorite. And this week we are reviewing Aladdin. I was debating whether or not to do this one next because of course the movie itself is titled after the main character, which is a man, but it has one of the most popular Disney princesses in it and technically is still considered a Disney princess movie. This particular movie also has a special place in my heart. It came out in 1992, which is my birthday year, and so I grew up watching this movie. Although when I watched it, I surprisingly didn't remember a lot about it, so I actually had to pay attention to this one to be able to do the review today. The way that these go, we have broken our movie review into a couple different sections. First, we're going to start with a magical recap. Then we're going to move on to a pros and cons section, which I like to call magical moments and enchanting efforts. And then we'll move on to who I like to identify as my VMP, or very magical person. And finally, we'll talk about the origin story of Aladdin, which is my favorite part personally of the magical movie review, because I'm a big nerd and I like diving into folklore and understanding where we came from when we get our stories that we're most familiar with today. So let's dive right in. We're going into our magical recap. Now, this is where I'm going to deliver my recap of Disney's Aladdin as quickly as I can. Yes, I did write it down. Yes, I did practice. Weird desert guy is trying to get into a sand lion's mouth, but he can't. He has to be the diamond in the rough. Jump to Aladdin, running from the guards while he sings about being poor. Switch to Jasmine, complaining about being a princess and having to marry. Sultan doesn't know what to do, so he consults, oh no, it's the desert guy. His real name is Jafar. Jafar learns Aladdin is the diamond in the rough and sends off to capture him, but he's with Jasmine, who ran away. Ooh, scandalous. Jafar convinces Aladdin to go into the Cave of Wonders to retrieve the lamp. He gets trapped in the cave with the lamp and a magic genie. Genie gives Aladdin 3 wishes. Aladdin wishes that he was a prince so he can marry Jasmine. Jafar figures out the prince is him and tries to kill him. Genie uses a second wish to save his life. Jafar captures Sultan and Jasmine and the genie. Aladdin rescues them and convinces Jafar to wish himself to be a genie. Phenomenal cosmic power! Itty bitty living space. Aladdin wishes Genie to be free, happy ever after. I think that was okay. That one was much more difficult to condensed down into 30 seconds, only because there's so many different plot lines that we start with. Kind of like with Beauty and the Beast, like we start with the Beast's origin story and then we pop over to Belle and then their stories like merge together. Where here we're starting with Jafar, Aladdin, Jasmine, then we find out where Jafar and Jasmine's stories like interconnect, and then Aladdin kind of slides in there at some point. It was hard for me to cut out, like I always kind of write out like a quick version of the whole story, and then I end up cutting pieces out. And this one ended up being closer to 40 seconds rather than 30. I doubt the 20 people, maybe 20 is actually being pretty generous for myself and tooting my own horn, but the 20 people that watch this probably don't have their stopwatches out and are actually timing me. I like to be honest. So that's my magical recap. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope it was humorous, because that's kind of what I like to get out of doing that. So now we'll just go right into the pros and cons. The things that I like about these movies are going to be what I call magical moments. And while Aladdin is up there for me on one of my favorite Disney movies, especially princess movies, it doesn't have my favorite soundtrack, but in my opinion, A Whole New World is the best Disney duet that I like at this point of our Disney princess movies, because you do have Belle and Beast that sang Something There, and I do love that song, but A Whole New World is just classics when it comes to prince and princess, and it's very romantic and like very openly professing their love to each other. And now that I think about it, Belle and Beast don't actually sing together. Like, they don't sing to each other. It's more of like their thoughts are singing the song together, which is very meta. So this one is the very like openly I love you kind of whole new world. Our journey's been very magical. Whole New World is a magical moment for me. I love that portion very, very much. It also, I like the scene in general where they actually like fly and see the whole world. Like, they visit different countries, they visit China, they visit Rome, and you get a little flavor of the other Disney movies that they've done so far, which is really fun. I feel like this is one of the first Disney princess movies that gives us Easter eggs from Disney princess movies past, which any Disney movie fan knows. We're always keeping an eye out for Easter eggs with Disney movies because the Imagineers just love to do that. The other magical moment for me, of course, hands down, is going to be just Robin Williams as the genie. I grew up in the Robin Williams era. I'm not even ashamed to say that Flubber was one of my favorite movies as a kid. So, sorry, I'm trying to sit up straighter. I feel like just one, it's very nostalgic and miss him in the entertainment industry in general, but with him as the genie, it's almost like you get a combination of his personality and the character of the genie himself. You get like 50 characters within one. So Robin Williams' voice acting talent with all the different dialects and accents and everything that he can do, and then the fact that the genie has this infinite ability to be able to transform himself into different animals and people and objects, definitely makes his character very versatile and entertaining to watch. Friend Like Me kills me every time. It's definitely really funny. And then another magical moment for me that I realized as we were watching the movie is this is the first really big change of pace in Disney culture. So everybody that we've watched so far has been a white Disney princess, and I have plenty of representation, so it was nice to go to a Middle Eastern influenced Disney princess and land and just kind of get more of that culture. While I understand that there is still stretches of the imagination and things that Disney kind of played into a little bit more heavily just for the entertainment factor, it's still nice that they at least took that leap. Even more so when they did the live action, which eventually we'll talk about the live action films a little bit more. But I thought that that was, for me, just watching it as an adult was a magical moment. I can't even really pinpoint the exact moment in the film where I kind of thought about it. I was like, this is nice. Like, we've just seen a bunch of German and English and French ladies so far. All white people with dark hair, and Cinderella, and then a mermaid, which isn't really a real person, which isn't tied to a particular nationality because she lives in the ocean. So, and she's also not real. So now on to enchanting efforts. So these are things that didn't really land well with me watching the movies. I don't want to necessarily call them cons because I like to try to keep it as positive as possible here on Magical Movie Review. One of the biggest things that I said out loud to Adam as we were watching it is, Abu is an asshole. Especially in the beginning of the movie. It's sweet that Aladdin and Abu kind of found each other and they have each other to rely on for friendship and for food, for that matter, but he is so against giving his bread to the children, and then he's kind of a jerk to Jasmine for no reason at all, other than the fact that he might be a little bit jealous. He's always the one getting them into even more trouble. It seems like Aladdin and Jasmine are on the brink of getting away with her accidentally stealing an apple, like she doesn't know any better. And then, of course, he bows and all the things that he steals comes flying out of his pocket. I think he, at the beginning of the movie, while I think he's cute and I cheer for him as a character, Like, he's just kind of a jerk. And then towards the end, he and the carpet just become besties, and their little monkey slash inanimate object relationship is precious. The other thing that didn't really sit well with me at the end of the movie, which is one of the victories that come out of it, is Aladdin wishes the genie to be free, and then the Sultan's like, oh, I'll add to the celebration and allow the princess to marry whoever she wants. Like, did it really have to take a near-death experience on your part to change the law? Like, if it were that easy for you to change it, why couldn't you have changed it at the beginning of the movie? Like, you loved your daughter just as much. Like, why did it have to be that difficult? I don't know. Like, I understand near-death experiences in most people's lives in real life actually change their perspective, and they might change direction on their life goals or how they view the world, so there's definitely validity there. But the movie made it seem like laws can't be changed, and then he's like, oh, okay, never mind, I can change it. Just kidding. Like, that part to me just seems a little silly. Those are really the only two things that I had just a big old question mark over my head while watching it. I do love this movie quite a bit. It's one of my favorites. I do love all of the characters, so it was difficult to choose a VMP. It took me a minute, but I reflected on the things that stood out to me as magical moments, so to help me decide, and it was really between Jasmine and Genie. I ultimately went with Genie because he, from the beginning, has a very defined and distinguished moral compass and tries to impart some of that wisdom onto Aladdin and kind of be his Jiminy Cricket throughout the movie. And he stays true to his friendships, but he also goes through trials and tribulations. His lamp gets stolen by Jafar. He has to obey because that's just how the magic works, and yet still is able to thwart the enemy and kind of swing things in the direction of what is right. So Genie was my VMP for this one. Jasmine was a very, very close second because of the fact that it was a change in pace for Disney culture. A different kind of Disney princess that we can really find beautiful, and I love her outfits, of course, and just her makeup. As you can see, I tried to do a little bit of Jasmine influence here. I thought I was getting very close to drag queen territory earlier, but I think it ended up okay. I also really enjoyed the fact that she didn't really care about hiding her feelings. Like, she just kind of said whatever she wanted to say, especially to the princes, and I like that she kept like running princes off. Like, she gets to be picky when she chooses her person that she's gonna marry, and she stuck by it, and I think that that's a really important message, especially for young women, and I thought her character did a great job of portraying that. We're now getting to the point where I'm ranking our Disney movies, so I'm still gonna keep Beauty and the Beast at the top, Little Mermaid as the second in my hierarchy, Aladdin, Cinderella, Snow White, and then Sleeping Beauty last in the list. So if you're a nerd like me, or if you've found these origin stories or the nerd alerts fun, stick around because we're going to dive into where did the Aladdin story come from. It took me a while to actually like really kind of dive in and figure things out because it has a complicated history and just origin of where it comes from, and I learned quite a few really interesting facts which we'll get to in just a moment. But the original book that we'll start with is a collection of tales from the Islamic Golden Age, which is about 8th to 14th century. Quite a few hundreds of years worth of stories that have been passed down, mostly orally, just like most other cultures. That was your first form of storytelling. But the actual collection of stories or folklore was called 1001 Nights. And it was popularized because the kind of lore behind it was there was a prince who was cheated on, essentially, and he murdered his wife, and then he kept marrying virgins and killing them on their wedding night or the next night or very shortly after they got married, as kind of like his revenge on women because they couldn't be trusted. And so eventually the prince's right-hand man couldn't find enough virgins, like, we're running out of people. So his sister kind of volunteers, or his daughter, I can't remember which one, she volunteers and says, you know what, I'll marry him. Reluctantly, he says yes, but like they don't have any other options, so he says sure. So the prince marries her, and on their wedding night, she starts telling him a story, but she doesn't finish the story, so it forces the prince to keep her alive because he really wants to hear the end, and he just kind of keeps doing that, like they keep entering in that cycle, and that's where we get to 1001 Nights worth of fairy tales or folk tales. The Islamic Golden Age gives us the history and gives us all of those different stories, a couple of which we're somewhat familiar with. Like, there's a few like Sinbad stories in there. But in 1701, Antoine Galland, who is a French narrator and storyteller, he actually comes upon this book and he does the first translation into French in that year, and he kind of travels the world and finds more stories to add to the collection. That's when we see a story called Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp added to this storybook, along with Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, which I thought was very interesting. And this is the part, the trajectory of where we start seeing like a bunch of retellings of Aladdin and the Wonderful Lamp. There's been so many adaptations since then, and it's hard to find the original one. I found a few copies of the full story online, but it didn't have a specific author tied to it. It had some like sources that I wasn't quite sure on, but I did find an article on National Geographic, of all places, that went through kind of the synopsis and the differences between Aladdin that we know and Aladdin, the original story. I'm kind of bouncing between multiple different sources here, and I'll source them down below in case you're interested in reading any of these. Essentially, the stories are very similar in that there's a boy who, in this case, actually lives at home with his mom, is kind of just a lazy bum, and then a long lost uncle shows up who is secretly an evil magician, and kind of like takes him under his wing and tries to show him the world and tries to like convince him to be a merchant and teach him his ways and everything, but ends up convincing Aladdin to go into the Cave of Wonders and retrieve this lamp. So we're seeing that influence in the Jafar realm, but Jafar is a stranger. To me, it's more easily believable if you have like this uncle, while long lost and still somewhat of a stranger, he still put some time in. Like, my assumption is that they put in at least a couple of weeks worth of training as a merchant for him to gain Aladdin's trust to go into this dark cave. And he retrieves the lamp, and he also retrieves a ring. This is where it gets interesting because there's two genies. There's the more powerful, all-powerful genie that comes from the lamp, and then there's a less powerful genie that comes from the ring, and that's important for the story later. But the other crazy thing about either of these is there's not a limit to the number of wishes that the holder of the lamp or the ring is allowed to have. So I think that that is unique to the Disney film. And I couldn't find another adaptation that had like 3 wishes and that was your rule. I wonder if Disney made that up for the story of Aladdin. If you know different, if you have a different source, tell me. Link it down below. I definitely want to know. He can whip out these lamps, or this lamp and this ring, and then basically wish for whatever he wants. Essentially, one of his first wishes is to marry the princess. Now, the princess is actually already betrothed to somebody else. They consider the fiance or the other prince to be kind of another villain in the story because they're battling each other for the princess's affections. But of course the princess ultimately falls in love with Aladdin and they get married. There's actually a third villain, which is the more evil brother of the first magician that tricked Aladdin into thinking he was his uncle, who steals the lamp and then tries to use it against Aladdin, but Aladdin uses the ring genie, and the ring genie can't like undo the magic that the lamp genie can do, but he uses the magic of the ring genie to save himself and the princess from harm. There's still the same kind of storyline of Jafar is still kind of present in the origin story, but in the origin story it's 3 different villains that Disney has morphed into just like one giant villain sorcerer, which is cool. Like, there's a lot. I don't want to have to keep track of 3 different villains. Then we're getting into Game of Thrones territory, and then I'm like all kinds of lost. The other really interesting thing that I found out through my digging, in the setup of the Aladdin story, like one of the first lines is like, in the city of cities of China. So the actual story itself is Middle Eastern from the people that told the story, like where Antoine got his story from were Middle Eastern storytellers. Their story is rooted in China, but that's the only thing that references China. All of the names and the lore that's kind of in the story is still very Middle Eastern, East Asian is what I read. It's not really inappropriate for Disney to then turn around and kind of draw their influence from Iraq, because that's kind of where the melting pot of all of the different influences from all of the stories so far, 1001 Nights collection. I think it's appropriate, but I think it's unique that they kind of pick a specific spot and then make up a fictional place of Agrabah to tell the story in, because all the other places, there's not a name to the city. Cinderella, Snow White, Beauty and the Beast even, we have influences and we know kind of the general country or area that the story is from or rooted in, but this is the first like city name that we're getting, and it's fictional, which I think is fine, especially when there's just kind of a Mod Podge of influences. You're creating something all your own, so you have some flexibility there. But that's it. That's everything that I found out. I'll plug in the Nat Geo link and the links to the stories that I did find for anybody else that wants to dive into those on their own. If I left anything out, or if you have any like other big question marks, because there's a few big question marks that I have after just digging through some of this stuff, put them below and we can try to figure out the answer together. I hope you enjoyed this magical movie review. It's been really fun to make these. I am getting to the end of the princess list where we're about halfway through, if not a little over halfway. I am looking forward to planning those out and providing my feedback to you guys so that you can also give me your thoughts on our Disney princess favorites. If you have any ideas or any opportunities that I'm missing when I'm doing my magical movie reviews, absolutely feel free to comment below, or head on over to my Instagram and let me know at magicxmolly or Magic by Molly, however you'd like to say it. And I will see you around here next time. What the buddy boy? Come here, boy. A surprise! Oh, a little buddy boy. Look how beautiful you are. I can show you the world. Shining, shimmering, splendid. Tell me, buddy, now when did you last let your heart decide? That was a very cute flip, boy. You love me? Yeah, I love you too. Say bye-bye, boy.